Thank you for joining us this afternoon on Indivisible. I'm your host, John Stubbins, and thank you, America, for joining us. You know, Obama and Biden, when they were in the White House, they had a gang that did a lot of damage to this country, as you well know. And my guest today, his rights were violated in many ways. He was treated very badly in many ways. And we're going to get to that here in just a second. But I also wanted to announce that here on Indivisible with John Stubbins, this is our first broadcast on freedomfirstnetwork.com. So I want everybody to know that we're expanding, we're growing, and just want to welcome in our audience. And thank you for being here, America. So in an attempted coup of President Donald John Trump, interfering with the peaceful transition of power that all presidents are supposed to receive, the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton, the DNC, all the Democrats led by James Comey, McCabe, Rosenstein, other partisans like Kevin Clinesworth, who was in the news recently. I'm sure you saw that he pled guilty. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Bruce and Nellie Orr, and so on and so on and so on. There's so many characters, so many bad actors in this story of treason, and we're going to get to that with our guests, but so many hateful people. And these people, not only did they do this to Carter Page and George Papadopoulos and, through Crossfire Hurricane and the Steele dossier, but they lied to the American people. And to accomplish this, they spied on and violated the civil rights of Carter Page, who is our guest today, ruining his life completely, destroying everything that this patriot had worked for. And you're talking about a lifetime of great achievement. This is a man who worked for the CIA and the FBI, helping America. Okay, not hurting America, helping America during his entire time. Not to mention his service in the Naval Academy. Yeah, the man has 4 degrees. Just an intelligent man that did everything in his power to help the United States of America. And little did anyone know that the highest levels of the FBI would conspire with the Obama-Biden administration to bring down the rule of law in the United States as we know it. And Carter Page was put through hell. He was transparent. He cooperated every step of the way, to the point of exhaustion, to the point where he had to hide for his life because of threats made against him. Dire threats. Imagine your life being threatened by multiple individuals and having the FBI spying on you, your emails, your phone calls, all of your career contacts that you've built up, and they couldn't find anything because there was nothing. And the media, even after they found out that Carter Page had done nothing wrong, they continued to perpetuate this lie daily, even after IG Michael Horowitz hammered and blasted the FBI in December 2019 for FISA abuse, surveillance, missteps, whatever you want to call it. It's just nonsense. And by the way, I want to just show you that Carter has his new book out, Abuse and Power. It's an amazing book. I've been diving into it, going back, reading it a second and third time, marking passages. It is just phenomenal. I highly recommend that you pick up the book. And I'm going to show you Carter's website as we get into the book and into the show. So without further ado, I want to bring on my guest today, Carter Page. Welcome to the show, Carter.
Great to be with you, John. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thrilled to have you, brother. these people, what they did to you, how they treated you, the deeper I dig into this thing, it just blows my mind, the audacity that these people had and that they continue to have as they continue to utilize the media to continue to spread this Russia hoax. They keep coming back to it, okay? And you have Obama, Biden, all their surrogates out there, even now, even during this election cycle, trying to continue to point to this Russia hoax, a bunch of nonsense that never happened. And here we are.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not only that, as a group. I mean, we know that this was a multi-million-dollar smear campaign against myself to take down and interfere in the last presidential election cycle. Yes, that was funded by the DNC and their associates and their network of political operatives in and around Washington. But what's even worse is a lot of the same cast of characters who are at the center of this are actually still part of exactly what you're describing in terms of the continuation of precisely the same election interference tactics and disinformation initiatives in support of foreign interests. And so it's just more of the same. So unfortunately, that's been a big problem, a big headwind that President Trump has had to deal with since the first ever campaign of his life. And unfortunately, we're still in the process of getting some truth out around it. And that's the purpose of this book project, to try to shine a light on some of this criminality which was advanced by the Democrats and their associates, including the media, as you correctly noted.
Yes. And you know what's interesting about it is that, you know, it's like in your book, you show me the man and I'll show you the crime, the great quote that you listed. Okay. You know, they were looking, if your name would have been Don Steele or Phil Marcus, it wouldn't have mattered. They were coming after you because of the simple decision that you made to support President Trump. And no matter what, they were going to get to him to try to bring him down and destroy his presidency, destroy the peaceful transition of power, if it ever got that far. They were hoping that it never got that far, right? But look, we knew, you know, they had their backup plan, right? But it didn't work. And it didn't work because you did nothing wrong. President Trump did nothing wrong. Just like, you know, Papadopoulos, General Flynn, you guys were held by the media and these Democrat cowards like Adam Schiff, and I'll get to him in a minute, who make my blood boil because all they do is lie day after day after day. It doesn't matter if the subject is Carter Page. It doesn't matter if the subject is even President Trump. They lie to their constituents. They've been doing it forever. And it's time the American people wake up. And by the way, I saw this statement to Fox News that you had made that you wanted to make it clear that Christopher Wray's changes were not bold enough. And I'm going to quote here. As we now approach the next presidential election, these small steps by the DOJ and FBI have not yet sufficiently addressed the criminal acts by ruthlessly partisan political actors in the swamp. That is perfectly put, Carter.
Well, and there are so many additional levels to that. And the more you understand the facts and the details of all this criminal activity that happened, both by the U.S. intelligence community, but also the Democrat Party and their associates, it's absolutely clear, as a lot of people have come to understand through the last several years of investigations, which has only just scratched the surface of it, the
Right.
full extent of this criminality and the abuses that these people have been at the center of. And, to your point on the FBI, one of the big problems, and the thing that has made both Chairman Lindsey Graham, Chairman Johnson, Chairman Grassley, so many senior members of Congress absolutely incensed, is that they continue to try to cover up these things. There has not been full transparency. And again, that's part of what I've tried to do with this book, is to provide more of a full picture after I had been blocked countless times by many of the same perpetrators within the DOJ and FBI from getting the truth out.
Yeah. And like I listed them here. Supposedly there were 40 corrective changes by Ray. Okay. Not good enough, Ray. Sorry. We're going to hold your feet to the fire, pal. IG Michael Horowitz, he found 17 errors and omissions in the FISA application, obviously, we all know about. And Comey says, listen to that, Jim Comey, of all people, this guy, okay? Comey said he was overconfident in the procedures that the FBI and justice had built over 20 years. I mean, this guy, what a hack, okay? It's a laughable statement by Comey, first off. Second off, Comey's not out of the woods here, okay? Comey is in deep doo-doo as far as I'm concerned. And the American people, the patriots of America, regardless, I pray to God that Durham holds his feet to the fire, but he's going to get his. He's going to get his, because what Comey did, he knew way before all of this had to get as far as it did, and Comey didn't pull the plug. He continued on with this masquerade, right? So Comey, to me, is subject number one in this fiasco. By the way, in the Washington Examiner, August 25th, Joe DeGeneva, who I love, he says John Brennan appears, and we'll get to John a little bit more later because I've got something else on him, appears to be a witness against Comey, right, in the Durham inquiry. I found that interesting. And, of course, former CIA Director John Brennan, he was interviewed over the last few days at CIA headquarters in Langley. So, you look at that, and it's like, okay, he says, DeGeneva says, I don't know whether Comey is a target or not. He says, I can't concede to the fact that he isn't, given the Kleinsmith guilty plea, right? Last week or 2 weeks ago. But there's no doubt that Comey is at the center of the investigation. So the fact that he has not been interviewed, and the fact that the FBI, it is obvious now that he's at the central focus of the Durham investigation. So we know James Comey's not out of the woods, no matter who's told him what.
Yeah, I think one of the key issues, and to me, the biggest priority, and it goes back to kind of my mission over the last year as I've been working on this book, is we just need the truth. I think it's an open question. I think, as Joe DeGeneva correctly noted, there's a lot of uncertainties as to what direction's going to happen. This whole thing is going to take, who's going to be held accountable, who will just be sort of ignored or let off. But I think the biggest problem, again, it's sort of a repeat of our last presidential election, where a lot of operatives within Washington running amok have not given the full truth. And to me, that is the most essential, critical process over the course of the next couple months, is just getting the truth out there. And again, I think this book does a important first step in terms of actually opening that up. And there's so much more on that on many levels.
Sure. And by the way, I found it interesting because I watched your town hall with Greg Jarrett, which was fascinating. And you guys really got into chapter 6, which I have this marked here, that I had good reason to believe that the U.S. Department of Justice's Special Counsel Office operated with the same bag of politically minded tricks that Senators Mark Warner, Richard Burr, and their security director, James Wolf, had recently relied on. And I thought that was a nice lead-in to the entire chapter. A great job there. Perhaps realizing that they had nothing on me, my FBI handler chose to make my red bucket hat a topic of conversation when we met, right? So all of that kind of raised my eyebrow, and I started to go back through it again and again. And then I looked here, and again, I said this earlier, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. This was Stalin's sidekick, Lavrenti Beria. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
You got it.
And I've heard that before. So when I saw that, I said, this is right on the money. Carter hit the nail on the head. So it was fascinating. And all through this chapter, in fact, I even wrote this down because I found it was so interesting. Jeannie Ray, okay, when you were discussing Jeannie Ray and the sticky notes, how she would slap them down harder and harder as she got more irritated during this hearing. And you've got these 20 jurors looking at you up and down. And then you went on to say that, even later on, one of the jurors you could tell just wasn't buying what they were selling. Okay. And I thought that was brilliant because the bottom line is nobody's going to buy this. Nobody's going to buy this. You've got Jeannie Ray, who, she brings in this junior lawyer, Rush Atkinson, to do the dirty work of asking you the questions that she writes down on the sticky notepad. And it's like, full disclosure, ma'am, you are a Hillary Clinton operative. You, ma'am, are part of why we're even here in the first place, because of how your dirty dealings are. It just blew, I'm sure, and you even stated it in the book, and it's fascinating. And there was a moment where you realized what you were in for with these people when you realized that Jeannie Ray was involved in who she was and her ties to Clinton. And with Clinton, being at the front and paying for the Steele dossier, it just blows my mind that where's the oversight? Nobody would have said, sorry, Jeannie, you're not going to be involved in questioning Carter Page or even passing notes to Carter Page, or for that matter, anybody else that's on this panel of attorneys that's questioning you with a stack up to here of papers, why you can't even bring in one sheet of paper.
Well, I think part of the problem is, and it's related to what you're talking about, is the severe conflicts of interest. And just a few months before that incident, that day in Mueller's witch hunt dungeon in the same Pretty Man FISA courthouse in Washington, Attorney General Sessions recused himself. Now, why did he recuse himself? He played a very small, he was to the best of my knowledge, he did not give any cash to the Trump campaign. There was no sort of money operations. What is known about Ms. Ree is that she actually gave money to the Democrats.
Right.
And I think there's sometimes people lose track of this a little bit, but it's not just the Hillary Clinton campaign. It's a much larger operation, a much more pervasive operation, which, continues to pull various tricks now, known as the DNC. And so, as a people sort of giving money to this operation, that is very different than Mr. Sessions, right? Who, when I met him, he specifically told me in a dinner I attended over the summer of 2016, over a year earlier, that the reason he volunteered for the Trump campaign or became a part of it himself was due to the fact that some guy from his office had suggested it to him. It's not like they have any long-term relationship. It's not like, as far as I'm aware, I don't think he actually gave cash. And again, when this cash is leading to this severe election interference campaign where they actually the Democrats hire foreign spies to interfere in our election and also deceive another court in that very same courthouse where I was getting interrogated, the Pretty Man FISA courthouse in Washington, just near the Capitol. It's extraordinary on so many levels.
Yeah, it really is. And, you get the sense, because I read that passage about Sessions, you almost get the sense like, why did he even accept President Trump's invitation to become the Attorney General? He didn't even seem like he was into it. And, I'll be honest with you right now, and maybe I'm just an old school guy. I'm a military veteran like you are. God bless you, brother. Maybe we're just cut from a different cloth. But I'll be honest with you, Carter, I wouldn't want him on my team. I don't care how qualified he is. I don't care how many years he was in the Senate. Doesn't matter to me. Because if you're not going to be a part of my team, you look at William Barr, okay? William Barr, the current AG, he wants to be there. He wants to fight for what's right. He wants to be on President Trump's team. President Trump didn't have to beg him. AG Barr's been AG before. This is the first time. So, look, I don't want someone on my team that doesn't want to be there. And I'm sure you feel the same way. You played sports, you get it. I mean, look, it just doesn't work. The team chemistry breaks down. And, with President Trump going after the swamp the way that he has to because of all that's rotten there and corrupt and how long it's been rotten and corrupt, using a scalpel, it works, but sometimes you got to use a bulldozer, and just the common man, the common sense of people, they understand that analogy because that's what the swamp is. It's filth, it's scum. It needs to be rooted out. I want to move on, still in chapter 6, because I thought this was a nice passage. It wasn't until the following year that America would see news reports claiming that Rosenstein had allegedly suggested that he secretly recorded President Trump and discussed recruiting cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Mr. Trump from office. I wanted to ask you about that. Do you think that Rosenstein actually believed in his mind that he could pull that off?
Well, I think it's another example of the dual standards of justice. And it actually goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the continued problems to this day at the FBI. So over the summer, unfortunately, FBI Director Wray named a new general counsel for the FBI, the top lawyer in the FBI. Who does he name? He names someone who's from the same law firm where Rod Rosenstein works today, right? So, and not only Rod Rosenstein at this law firm, the new FBI general counsel, but also Sally Yates. They're all members.
Is it Perkins Coie?
No, it's another law firm. You can
another scumbag law firm.
Well, there's a lot of open questions, and unfortunately, there's a lack of answers and an ability for people to just dance around those answers. And that was part of the disappointment over this summer, which is now coming to an end. We had 2 Senate Judiciary hearings on Capitol Hill where members of Congress were asking various questions to each of them, each of these partners of and it's actually Chris Wray's old law firm as well, right? And so these ties and these networks, it helps explain why there were 2 standards of justice. You know, people look out for individuals that they're close with, right? People who are, you know, there are vested interests related to these firms, right? And again, a lot of unanswered questions. I mean, who knows what happened? All I know for sure is none of these people have been interrogated to the level that I have been interrogated. And again, you know, Ms. Yates and Mr. Rosenstein, their names are on these false FISA warrants with all these errors and omissions, which have now been uncovered. And so far, zero accountability.
Yeah. And I'm going to, and with that, that hits me right on the head here. I'm going to move on because this falls right in line. This is on page 127, still in chapter 6. The world would learn the next year that in June 2017, Rod Rosenstein signed what was allegedly the most invalid and illegitimate FISA warrant affidavit of them all. The last of them, when the supporting evidence for probable cause in Carter's case was demonstrably non-existent. That says it all.
Yeah.
That says it all.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of levels to it. And that's, you know, in another section, I believe, pretty close to there, I talk about how, and, you know, this has never been acknowledged. I had sent a series of correspondence the month before. That was signed in June of 2017, in the early months, first half year of the Trump administration. The month before, right after Mr. Mueller was named by the same guy, Rod Rosenstein, I sent both of them a series of letters explaining the truth, explaining reality. What did they do instead? They advanced this DNC-funded narrative by their fellow Washington lawyers, you know, just kind of looking out for their associated swamp creatures who they had deep ties with. So, you know, Washington insiders are constantly looked out for, whereas innocent Americans, you don't hold your breath for justice, at least thus far.
Yeah, and I found it interesting how you alluded to the fact that when that all began, you had hope and faith that perhaps Mueller, because of him being a Marine, that there might be a chance that this guy deep down in his soul would be about justice and doing the right thing. And you found out, obviously, later on, that was not the case with Bob Mueller. He was rotten as well. They got to him. And by the way, the other interesting thing I found about that, you described it perfectly, was the time when they were fumbling for their keys and his wife went around to the other side of the car and a reporter came up and lightly asked a question and he felt flustered. And at that moment, it dawned on you how you know, he felt nothing like you felt. The hell that you went through, that you were put through. And his little feathers were ruffled just by a simple little tiny question by some journalist that threw him a softball anyway, right? A softball. So I have no sympathy for Bob Mueller. I'll go on. Eventually revealed as more DNC-funded lies, right? That information disclosure was long postponed after British intelligence services applied great pressure to cover for Christopher Steele in an effort to protect their own reputation and block the release. So I think that, this starts to tie all this together. And you went on page 130. This is back to Jeannie Ray. The first time I ever met Jeannie Ray, you saw her in the hallway outside the courthouse, and she angrily scowled at you. I love that description. And she was barking orders at you, right? Telling you to go, into your summoned area where they hold you until they were ready. And, this woman, the audacity of her, again, it blows my mind that she was allowed to even be there in the same room with you. I'm not getting over that. And she needs to be held accountable, because and I know that she was part of the whole Clinton master plan from the get-go. We've been watching this whole thing transpire and build even before President Trump even announced, the whole bleach pit thing and the emails back to Aberdeen. And we've been following it. We know the American people are not stupid. And, later on, page 131, Ray, also a member of Mueller's team under scrutiny for political donations, as you had mentioned. She doled out more than $16,000 to Democrats since 2008. This is what CNN reported, so I don't know if I could trust that, but whatever. She maxed out her donations in both 2015 and 2016 to the Clinton presidential campaign, giving a total of $5,400. So she's in Clinton's back pocket. That's the bottom line. Everybody knows that, and yet she's asking you, a volunteer supporter of President Trump, who hasn't even been elected. I mean, it just blows my mind.
Who I had never actually met, by the way. Never met his entire life.
Exactly. You had never even met President Trump. You had worked through Clovis and I'm just sitting here losing my mind for a minute. Corey Lewandowski. You went to, I remember the whole thing. You went to go meet with Corey Lewandowski. You ended up getting a meeting with Sam Clovis that day. Then it built from there, but you ended up having a pretty close relationship with Sam, probably closer than you were to Corey.
Oh, yeah. And I barely had any contact at all with Corey. So, I mean, again, and it goes back to the overall media narrative, where people have just tried to spin these complete lies, complete fabrications, the misrepresentations of any reality. And I think the perfect example of this, I'm not sure whether it's one of the points you'll touch on, but in that same chapter, I talk about what one of your former guests on Indivisible has called the Mueller dossier. That's as per Congressman Nunes. He referred to it as the latest, or one of the subsequent dossiers. And unfortunately, when that document eventually came out, it was full of lies again, right? It's just more misrepresentations and just not a full picture. And I think both Congressman Nunes, your former guest on this program, and so many other members of the House Intelligence Committee, Republican members, I should say, as well as House Judiciary Committee, tried to get some semblance of the truth. And unfortunately, this Mueller guy it was sort of a Biden senior moment where he just looked completely befuddled and confused. And so things, related to the dossier and related to Fusion GPS, I mean, he kind of just avoided it completely. These are core elements of what happened, the real election interference. And that's why I think it's really important. If we don't have full accountability over the course of the next couple of months, as I started to do with this book, we need to at least have some semblance of the truth, because it's just been a complete roadblock thus far.
Yeah, and and I want to be clear about something, because when you brought up Biden, I want to be very clear to the American people. Look, everybody knows that Joe Biden is, he's losing it up here. I don't know if it's Parkinson's or what's going on, but he's not the same guy that he was when he was vice president. He's lost quite a few steps mentally since then, and everybody notices it. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to notice it. He's lost a few steps. But the reason I want to establish that is because when Biden was vice president in the Obama administration, he was thinking clearly. And he, just like Obama, and I'll get to that here shortly, was very much involved in the decision to come after Carter Page and everybody else to get to President Trump. So if Biden thinks he's going to get off the hook because he can claim that I wasn't thinking clearly, no. I already see that one coming. That's not going to fly. The American people, again, are not stupid. We know that he had his faculties about him then. If he didn't, he wouldn't have been sending his son Hunter over and dealing with Ukraine and China. And we'll get to that in a minute. So adding further insult to injury, and more specifically, such Democrat campaign donations were the same fuel that paid for the DNC-funded consultant Christopher Steele's infamous dodgy dossier. And I wanted people to understand that so they get a sense of how the dossier came about through Christopher Steele, through Hillary Clinton and the DNC. So the vindictive harassment against their political adversaries in their official roles as U.S. government prosecutors seem to defy common sense and common decency, which every American can understand. It's like common sense, common decency, right? So you said, as I put two and two together, I was almost in a state of shock. In just a few minutes, your break would end and then you'd have to go back in there. And I'm not going to go any further, but I got the sense there that I was with you in that moment, the way it read in the book. It is just like Greg had said on your town hall the other day. It does read a bit like a novel in that regard. I felt like I was with you in that room, Carter, waiting.
Well, truth is stranger than fiction. And I mean, you have to bear in mind, I mean, that was a full day of interrogation, but it's just one of many, many days going over the course of over a year, right? In terms of this ongoing assault on innocent Americans. And, you know, probably the longest and most detailed and the most aggressive was during the, about a half a year earlier in March of 2017, when a bunch of agents working for both Comey and McCabe interrogated me over the course of 5 long, really harsh meetings. And unfortunately, you know, as it's now come out, now that we have this Inspector General report, little did I know at the time, although I asked about it and addressed it with them, they had already hacked all of my emails. They had already wiretapped, due to these fraudulent FISA warrant affidavits that were approved in that same courthouse in Washington. So, I mean, and not only that, but, and these another couple of chapters related to this, but the whole element, I mean, the specific Spygate related thing is, they sent operatives to come spy on myself. And as you, one of the people you noted there, Sam Clovis, just a great patriotic American, retired Air Force colonel. And he, another person who just got completely raked over the coals and just had his career completely upended. Unfortunately, he was nominated to become an undersecretary of agriculture. One of the top positions there, would have been one of the best ones ever. But, with all this crazy Mueller witch hunt stuff going on, he had to, withdraw his nomination or, send his regrets, just because it, similar to what they did to me, it creates a huge distraction. So, I mean, these are real lives, real innocent Americans who the Democrats, for political reasons, have tried their utmost to do as much damage as possible, just as a way of damaging our duly elected president, Donald Trump.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, these are lives built over many years, careers built, invested time, hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. The life that you built, you worked hard for. You didn't deserve this. Sam didn't deserve this. By the way, do you still talk to Sam?
Yeah. It's great to stay in touch. Although it's funny, it's like it actually in some ways reminds me of a scene in Schindler's List at the end, when these, the SS and the people that are just doing these really harsh tactics in this police state, finally at the end, when victory is declared, they kind of come out of the woodwork and they reunite, and they can actually continue their discussions again. I had so many people after the Mueller witch hunt, was finally concluded. We didn't talk at all during those years, during those very dark years in American history. But when President Trump was exonerated with this Mueller report, he, finally, I finally heard from Sam and so many other of the volunteers. Again, great Americans, almost all of whom are U.S. military veterans like Sam. But it's truly amazing. And actually another guy who was another Trump campaign volunteer, when he called me right after the Mueller report came out, he said, I was just so happy that even though I knew you, I didn't get called in front of that, that interrogation committee. So, but again, it only helps. I mean, and it's a sad thing, because our First Amendment rights, our core constitutional rights, not only is First Amendment about freedom of speech, freedom of the press, but another element is freedom of peaceable assembly, right? Yeah. Freedom of people to meet together and have an open dialogue. That got totally destroyed in the last presidential election cycle. And that's why, as I start to do with this book, it's important that people really know what happened now that we're going to the next presidential election cycle after these terrible abuses and treasonous steps against a lot of innocent Americans, primarily then candidate Donald J. Trump. And, looking at the tremendous damage that's been done to his administration is truly incredible. And there's, unfortunately, although he has achieved so many incredible things, it's important to kind of bear in mind all of these roadblocks and these terrible offenses and these unconscionable acts done by operatives in Washington and as part of the U.S. government who did so much to try to take him down. It only underscores just how incredibly strong he has been in terms of opening this. I mean, not many people could have, persevere through such a terrible abuse.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, you think about it and you let it soak in. This man's been attacked every single day. It's a new attack. It's a new facade. It's some new lie, some new, Adam Schiff story that he wants to tell, or Adam, or Pelosi or Schumer. It's some nonsense that they try to, get it's like this week going into the weekend, it was he tried to make it seem like over in France that he had stated something about our military and, they were a bunch of losers or some nonsense. And everybody knows that that's a lie. I mean, Look at how much the president has fought for veterans, veterans affairs, military, rebuilding our military, the money that he's put into it. There's no way. I would never buy that in a million years. And I don't believe that the military personnel, active duty or veterans, believes it. They had like 700 veterans and military personnel step up on behalf of President Trump this week to stand with him and say, no, 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 we're not going to buy that. The Democrats have been running roughshod with lie after lie. They think anything could stick. They think the American people are just dumb. And I'm here to tell them that's not true. And people have figured out this game.
Well, I think one element related to that is, I mean, it's another perfect example where not only is it untrue, it's exactly the opposite of the truth, right? I mean, it reminds me of the whole scam that the FBI did and in conjunction with the DOJ, where, doctoring evidence, where I am someone who has served my country, both in the military, but more specifically to the CIA and the FBI. Not only was that misrepresented, but it's exactly the opposite. They wrote not a source when I was a source, right? It's completely flipping the script where it's totally the opposite of the truth.
Yeah. And to kind of sum up, because I could go on and on. This is chapter 6 is just amazing, but to just kind of sum up this chapter, you said no American was charged with any crime related to the subordinating of the U.S. election in a conspiracy with the Russians, and to this day, no one's been charged. Of course, you had Manafort, Papadopoulos on some process crimes, but it had nothing to do with Russia, having nothing to do with the Russia hoax, having nothing to do with meddling or President Trump meddling or Carter Page doing anything wrong, breaking any laws. So it's a bunch of nonsense. And it's
another example of the opposite of the truth, right? It was not, as you correctly just noted, it's not the Trump campaign colluding with the Russians and with foreign agents. It was the Democrats hiring foreign agents, network of spies, right? And what did they do? They used this network, these overpaid consultants, to dig up dirt based on Russian disinformation, which it's now been, uncovered that's exactly what it was. And unfortunately, again, and another reason why I wrote this book is when that Inspector General report, a lot of big headlines came out of that last December. It still was just a little tip of the iceberg in terms of the truth. And I think that one particular aspect in terms of Russian disinformation, that this is exactly what they were using. Of course, this Obama appointee, Mr. Horowitz, they redacted that information. And unfortunately,
I saw that.
The Senate had to really press hard to finally get that unredacted. So, but step by step, we keep learning more of the truth. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's kind of like Bill Murray, baby steps, right? We got to take baby steps. Look, as you know, they like with Nunes and those guys, God bless their heart, they kept fighting to get those documents, and Tom Fitton over, look, everybody was fighting to get the FOIAs and everything else. And the Democrats were just slowing it down. They didn't want us to know. They wanted to slow walk it as long as they could, hoping they could get through the election, hoping that the insurance policy would come into effect and that the American people would know none of this. And if Hillary Clinton would have gotten elected, we wouldn't have known any of this, as you know. By the way, Peter Strzok, this guy, here's another guy. This guy comes out and says that mistakes in the FISA applications were due to agents being overworked. This was on September 6th. What, 3 days ago? He comes out and says this. And I'm like, what? When I read this, I said, I've got to ask Carter about this just to get his opinion. What do you think about that?
Well, as we know, he had a lot of extracurricular activities with Andy McCabe, then deputy FBI director, the one of his top lawyers, that Lisa Page woman. And unfortunately, again, not much accountability thus far. And the fact that they still, it's exactly where we were 4 years ago in the last presidential election, where these associates of the intelligence community, past and present, are working with the media, right? I think you're citing a statement he made on via one of the major media outlets, and
yeah,
unfortunately, it's another perfect example of what I was alluding to earlier, in terms of not getting the truth out there, and the American voters once again being fed false information, or things that do not really fully expose the scale and the terrible things that were done against so many innocent Americans. So it's really a severe shame.
Yeah, and look, and I mentioned a lot of the players, and again, there's so many more. We if we had several hours, we could get down and go through the list, right? We'll do that in the documentary, Carter, because we can get to more of it. We have more time to do it and lay it out in a way that people can see the pictures as well, connect the dots. Here's what was very surprising. I didn't expect this today, but I saved this for last, and you alluded to it earlier. Congressman Devin Nunes, who, as you said, has been on my show, great guy. He was on Maria Bartiromo's show today on Mornings with Maria Bartiromo, and Congressman Nunes, everybody, if you don't know, he's on the House of Ways and Means Committee, and he said, there's no evidence, none of Russia collusion to this very day, up to the minute. The Democrats continue to try to peddle it, and there's nothing, zilch, nada, zip. And the Clinton campaign, here's the facts. The Clinton campaign inserted the Steele dossier in 2016. They inserted it into the mix. Okay. Now, the Durham probe, which is going on right now, we brought it up earlier. We alluded to it earlier with Comey and Brennan. And Nunes brought up an interesting question. And I think this is the question that Durham needs to get to before he can lay out all the rest of the cards. Who ordered the kill shot? Was it Obama? Right? Was it Comey? Who ordered the kill shot to go in and do this? All lies. All lies. Durham piecing it all together, emails, text messages, interviews, documents, your case, Papadopoulos, General Flynn's. So this is the question Durham has to answer. And, way before this launched in July 2016, former spies, hacks like Stefan Halper, right, received huge sums of money. And Maria was talking about this today. right before the surveillance began on you. So right before they started to spy on you, Carter, Halper got $200,000 in 2015. Then in 2016, he gets $411,000, right? For what? For a report on China and Russia, supposedly. which is bogus. So it's a laugh. And the question here is, was John Brennan using the Office of Net Assessments to go and spy and trap you, Carter Page, and other Trump advisors, other Trump supporters that were on his team at that time? What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's another perfect example where so many questions such as these remain unanswered, right? Unfortunately, I think on that particular issue with Mr. Halper, former Professor Halper, Chairman Grassley has been pushing hard to try to get him, and some other senior members of the U.S. Senate have been pushing to try to get some disclosure. And unfortunately,
Yes.
It's been a huge uphill battle thus far, and a real lack of transparency and a lack of, shedding the full light. So, and, similarly, I mean, again, it's another example of the dual standards of justice. I mean, that 480-page Inspector General report that came out, there's all kinds of false information. They did uncover some important new tidbits therein, but unfortunately, Halper's name does not appear anywhere in that, right? So, there's a lot of cover up, a lot of redactions, a lot of secret code names, et cetera, where we don't really understand the full details still.
Well, Stefan Halper and Alexander Downer have not been called to testify yet. So you're right. But I'm hoping that they will. I'm hoping that Durham is gonna dig deep enough to make sure that Halper and Downer are brought in for questioning. Here's another thing. How are taxpayer dollars going to the Defense Department and ending up in this, former British spy network of hacks and American hacks, the Spies Club over in Europe, right? Over in Britain for this bogus work. So, there's no way, and Maria brought it up, there's no way that it costs this much for this kind of work. So where's the money? Follow the money. There's got to be ties. And Congressman Nunes made a great point on this, and I agree with him. There's got to be ties between the Fusion GPS folks who hired the foreign spy that supposedly, went to the Russian sources and the group of retired hacks, this Cambridge Club. There's got to be ties. I mean, again, we're not stupid, right? So, you connect the dots, you follow the money. There's just too many ties. Again, like Alexander Downer, right? Australian diplomat. He just happens to run into a Trump official. It just happens to mention something about emails, right? Just happenstance, Carter. I mean, I have to laugh because it's so absurd.
Well, again, it's another example. Christopher Steele's former boss, the prior head of MI6, again, we wouldn't have to speculate if we were just given the full truth and people acted with transparency, both in and out of government. But Mr. Dearlove, the former head of MI6, he was at that same Cambridge event in July of 2016. And, suffice to say, was not a Trump fan, really harsh words to say about then candidate Trump. So a lot of coincidences, a lot of open questions. And again, the time has come now to really get to the bottom of it. And I do everything I can to lay out the basics in this, the fundamentals of this story. Again, from an insider's perspective, having lived through it and having survived the terror thus far. But I think, I think it should be an inspiration and a call to justice by all Americans in terms of getting the full truth and the full information of what actually happened and what continues to create a huge headwind for the current president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. And unfortunately, probably in an election context, since we're just a few weeks out from November now, there needs to be some accountability for the Obama-Biden administration, which was the one that launched it in conjunction with their party, the DNC and the Democrat Party. So,
yeah, and it's just and Congressman Nunes has brought this up as well. Hillary, she was nervous, okay, because her illegal emails, the illegal server. She tried to make it look like President Trump, and before he was president, tried to make it look like Donald Trump and the Trump campaign had something to do with it. So just like Biden and Obama do, and the current Democratic Party do, they always project onto others what they're doing themselves, like we mentioned earlier. And it shouldn't be a surprise to all Americans that this is what they're doing. They're doing it today, right? If you turn on the news tonight, whether it's BLM or whether it's the border, it doesn't even matter what the discussion is. It's constant projection. And I guarantee you, in 2024, in 2028, in 2032, in 2036, I could put a paper in a bottle, seal it, and you could open it up for each of those elections, read the piece of paper, and here's what it's going to say. Whoever's running as a Republican is a racist. Right?
Well, yeah, I think that's right. And also, and I think it's a lesson learned because, as you're correctly noting, you have to learn from history, because history very often repeats itself. And what we have seen is a very aggressive tactics by the Democrats. And this goes back to what we were talking about in Chapter 6. I mean, the time I spent with then Senator Jeff Sessions, again, a true, nice, kind, gentle guy, all right, sure, which is fine. But when you're up against these real marauders and these people who are extraordinarily aggressive and extraordinarily dishonest, you just get torn up. And I think it's just a true call to action that, not only fight back and really understand the full story and do the research and do your homework. And I think my book is an important contribution to that. But
absolutely.
I think based upon that, you have to really, use that knowledge to do something about it. You have to be proactive as opposed to the Jeff Sessions, just recuse yourself and go into hibernation for a couple of years approach while these terrible historic events are happening to our country. And that to me has been the biggest thing, where I just want a restoration of our justice system, a restoration of the integrity and respect that the U.S. intelligence community had until terrible crimes against American democracy. So I think, there's a lot of work that we have ahead of us as loyal Americans.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it, Carter. You hit it on the head. And look, this October surprise that Obama, the Biden administration had. Remember the Russian reset? Okay, it's them again. I go back to the projection. We're going to uncover this slowly if need be, but it's all coming to light. And you've been vindicated, but you deserve to. I mean, first of all, I'm praying that you sue them. And it doesn't matter if it's each and every one of them or collectively, it doesn't matter. But we know that it was the Democrats. We saw it on television. It was live, and you can go back and watch the tape. They are the ones of the Russian reset. You remember when Obama, everybody, where he, we'll deal with this after the election. We'll be able to get to it and handle it. Yeah, everything real tiny and secret. They're not fooling anybody. And by the way, the Hunter Biden, China, Ukraine thing, I believe all of that. And we started talking about the fusion GPS. We didn't even get into some of this other stuff about Ukraine and the uranium and all that. Look, they tried to blame President Trump too. They did the exact same thing, same playbook, so we know what they're up to. And I guarantee you, America, this book right here, Carter Page's Abuse and Power, if you don't read this, you're not only doing yourself a disservice, you're doing your country a disservice, because this is happening. This story is unfolding right underneath your noses, and it's not over. And Durham's investigation is going to bring things to light, and it's important that Americans know why this happened to Carter Page, okay? What they did to him, what he went through, the hell that his life got put through the ringer, professionally, personally. They tried to destroy this man, and he didn't deserve it, and neither did the president. I want to thank you, Carter, for coming on the show today. It's been a great interview. Like I said, we could probably talk for hours on this, but it's been a fantastic show. I'm proud of you. And I just want to tell everybody one more time, take a look. Make sure that you get Abuse and Power. And you can get it at carterpagebook.com. Make sure that you get a copy. Get a copy for your mom and dad as well. Maybe your brother, your cousin. Let them know. Let them see. Let them read it for themselves and make up their own mind. But we're not going to put up with it here. As you know, on Indivisible, we tell the truth, and that's never going to stop. God bless you, Carter. We'll look to have an update from you. Yeah, we'll bring you back for an update as soon as we get more news from Durham. Okay.
I look forward to it. Thanks very much. Great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us on Indivisible. God bless you, America. We'll see you next time.